welcome to a very special interview show of The Prode. It's the 50th time when we are beginning the interview with this line. On this special occasion of our 50th interview, we bring to you a very special conversation on the topic that is close to the heart of almost every responsible human being on the planet, irrespective of their nationalities, and that is nature and environment. The first solution that comes to the mind of people when we talk about pollution is no other than a transition to green energy. To talk about this and much more about green energy and its significance and utility in the near future, I am joined by Vibhuti Garg, who is a senior energy specialist at the prestigious International Institute for Sustainable Development. Vibhuti Garg has 13 years of experience in the energy sector, and her recent work includes promoting sustainable development through influencing policy intervention on energy pricing, subsidy reforms and clean energy, and private participation in various areas of the energy sector. She has also advised a number of private and public sector clients about a range of power sector market issues. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your time and a very warm welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
Ma'am, I would like to begin the discussion by asking that the Indian government has pledged at Glasgow in 21 that India will cut its carbon emission to net zero by 2070. How do you see this ambitious target and how practical is it on the ground to begin with?
Right. So, if you'll see, India as a country is on a growing trajectory with expectation of strong economic growth. So this implies that the energy requirements will be huge. Now, the question is whether this economic growth will be fueled by carbon-intensive fossil fuels or more sustainable choices in the form of, clean energy sources. So, as you rightly mentioned, at COP26, Prime Minister Narendra Modi ratcheted up India's clean energy targets, pledging to cut emissions to net zero by 2070. In addition to increasing, non-fossil fuel capacity to 500 gigawatts and meeting 50% of energy requirements from renewable sources. Further, they announced reducing emissions by 1 billion tons and reducing the emission intensity of the economy by 45% from 2005 levels by 2030. Yes, these goals are ambitious, but if you see it in the light of the current event, especially, this is the need of the hour. India needs to reduce its reliance on expensive and more carbon-intensive fossil fuels. India, which imports about 80% of its crude oil and 45% of its natural gas, is experiencing price shockwaves. The Russia-Ukraine war is leading to shortages of other things as well, which includes food crops like wheat, corn, and sunflower. The shortages and increase in prices of such products is driving up food inflation and at the same time kind of increasing manufacturing production prices. As a result, we have seen increase in both consumer as well as wholesale prices, which both of them have taken a hit. India is being further burdened with a huge current account deficit, where the value of imported goods and services into the country far surpass the value of what it exports. In February 2022, we saw retail inflation at 6.07%, reaching the RBI 6% policy comfort zone. This was despite the government not passing on the surge in energy prices caused by the Russian invasion to consumers. Now, the rise in commodity prices also increased to an all-time high of 13.11% in February, which is the wholesale price inflation, implying that the year will end with double-digit inflation. So as I said, these recent global events have revealed that reliance on imported fuels can be expensive. It can also risk energy security and moreover can dampen economic growth. So India should fuel its economic growth by substituting coal, oil and gas demand with renewable energy alternatives. Any incremental and existing demand should be met through cheap and renewable energy. Renewable energy in India is available at a price of ₹2.5 per kilowatt hour, which is almost half of generation from thermal fuels. Now, with the price of renewable energy, battery storage, and electric vehicles decreasing, the competitiveness of fossil fuels will be further compromised. So Yes, while ambitious, these targets are achievable, but government needs to provide a stable and robust policy that do not change with political upheaval. This will provide confidence to developers and investors, and then India can definitely achieve those targets.
Yes, ma'am. I want to point it out that how difficult is it the transition from the traditional sources of energy for countries like India and China, which have a huge dependence on non-renewable source of energy, and what are some of the practical ways in which India can reduce its reliance on coal and other non-renewable sources? As we know that India and China are the countries who rely on the renewable energy, I mean non-renewable energy on on a huge scale.
Right. Yes, India relies heavily on fossil fuels. So in the electricity sector, if you see, thermal power still dominates the installed capacity mix with about 60-62% share. RE capacity addition has increased, but their share in total generation is still low, which is around 10 to 12%. So definitely, as I said, the progress is being made, but we need to further accelerate the growth in renewable energy capacity addition. Further, the Indian government has set a target to increase the share of gas in India's energy mix from 6% in 2021 to 15% by 2030. But in order to meet its energy demand, rather than relying on gas as a transitory fuel, India can build renewable energy capacity. Gas infrastructure requires massive capital expenditure, and any investment into building up gas infrastructure has risk. And the probability of these assets becoming stranded assets are much, much higher, where, the assets will be underutilized, which will further make it difficult for the service providers to pay their debt. So definitely the way to mitigate these risks is to build in less expensive renewable energy alternatives. Similar problems would arise if policymakers double down on domestic coal production. As well as being expensive, there are practical issues such as, railway transportation becoming a huge bottleneck, or even there are times of the year when, India faces excessive mine flooding, which reduces coal production and lead to such huge coal shortages. Now, because of these problems, getting finance for coal projects is increasingly difficult. So such investment should therefore be directed towards building an economy based on renewables. Now, whether you take electricity, you take transportation, renewable energy is turning out to be much, much cheaper. We are witnessing increasing prices of crude oil. So while electric vehicles require initial capital expenditure, but the cost of running is much smaller. Now, government is also now promoting green energy in other sectors also aggressively. There are discussions happening to use green ammonia or use of green hydrogen in steel sector, which is encouraging. So clearly, India needs to develop a clean energy transition pathway. That is where the investment will flow.
Okay. Ma'am, now just like we talked about the green energy, now coming to semiconductor, as we know that semiconductors are considered as the heartbeat of electric vehicles. And, in order to achieve the target of, green energy and, sustainable development, we have to focus a lot on electric vehicles. So in today's world, where we have got supply chain disruption because of COVID, conflicts and tensions between Taiwan and China, who are like some of the biggest players in this industry. So do you think it will affect the climate change goals of India and the world, and how big of a challenge is it according to you?
Yeah, so absolutely, supply disruption is adding to woes of countries like India in achieving their decarbonization goals. Realizing that India is giving a strong push to domestic manufacturing through schemes like PLI, government is getting a very positive response. In fact, government increased the infusion of capital for domestic manufacturing of solar modules. Finance Minister Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman proposed to make rupees 19,400 crore of additional allocation for the production linked incentive scheme for manufacturing of efficient solar modules, making the total budget to rupees 24,000 crore. Similarly, the government received positive response for battery manufacturing as well. The bid has been recently won by Reliance, Ola, Hyundai Motors, and Rajesh Export. So big capacities are being won by players like Ola and Hyundai Motors for 20 gigawatt hours each. So which means the focus is on EVs. It will take few years, but building domestic manufacturing base is the way forward, and that's how India can really mitigate the issue of dependence on China and Taiwan for the semiconductor thing that you just kind of highlighted.
Yeah. And another important thing that was highlighted at the COP26 summit was one sun, one world, one grid. So the idea of investing in solar, wind, storage, and other renewable energy generations in location endowed with renewable sources for supporting a global grid came to a place in recent COP26 summit, as I mentioned. So how effective will the idea of one sun, one world, one grid be? How do you see this?
Okay. So, high capacity transmission lines are being built to facilitate the trade of more power with these countries under this One Sun, One World, One Grid initiative. Now, if you look from the perspective of, different countries are endowed with different natural resources, and trading electricity has helped to bring down the cost of power and further lighten the burden of importing fossil fuels. So One Sun, One World, One Grid can help countries make the best use of their divergent natural resources and kind of take advantage of time differences to best use intermittent but low cost solar and wind power generation. Further, it will help countries to reduce reliance on coal for meeting energy demand in time periods when renewable energy is not available. Now, this initiative will also help India in achieving its net zero pledge. One Sun, One World, One Grid can be one of the potential alternatives to storage and reducing cost of renewable energy integration. But however, this will require cooperation in terms of having the right market mechanisms which send right price signals that justify the cost of establishing transmission infrastructure and renewable energy capacity. It would help to provide grid stability and encourage the uptake of clean technologies, if this becomes a reality. So now by promoting grid synchronization and power markets that encourage infrastructure and capacity expansion, the One Sun, One World, One Grid initiative could really help countries to achieve their emission reduction target by tapering the use of fossil fuels and paving the way for more deflationary renewable energy at the same time.
Now coming to the corporate side of it. So corporate sustainability is one of the most discussed topics nowadays. How effective has been this concept in terms of positive contributions to the environment, and how do you rate corporate sustainability as an idea?
I would rate it very high. So while Indian companies have been slow to join the race to net zero, they are starting to get their act together. In India, we have 14 companies which have committed to net zero targets, 29 have announced science-based targets, and 69 have further committed to taking climate action. Some of India's biggest companies such as Tata, Reliance, Mahindra, ITC, Adani, and Dalmia Cement have made net zero announcements. So various government corporations like even Indian Railways and Chhattisgarh Health Department have also committed to achieve net zero emissions by 2030 and 2050 respectively. Corporates will actually have to take a bigger role and ensure sustainability in their operations. As I said, some of the companies like Infosys, Dalmia Cement, Mahindra Holidays and Resorts, and Tata Motors are some of the Indian headquarter companies that have voluntarily adopted 100% renewable electricity consumption targets by joining the Climate Group and CDP's RE100 initiative. Additionally, we also have more than 40 international RE100 companies that have India presence and are moving their operations to renewable energy. So this becomes key, and all this is made possible, as the solar prices are plummeting, and we have reached a new low of rupees 2 to 2.5 rupees per kilowatt hour of renewable energy prices. This has also been possibly largely on account of access to low-cost global capital. So clearly, India can accelerate energy transition if it is able to access the global capital in the coming years.
Like, where do you see India in coming years in terms of sustainable development?
Interesting. So India is actually on the right path, but we need to accelerate the energy transition now. The building blocks for a low emission future are being put in place. So both the public and the private sectors are upbeat about being part of the transition journey. Developers and investors now need to be confident in stable and robust policies that do not change. Once this is ensured, I think there's no looking back. So India has already made, I would say, good progress in decarbonizing its electricity sector, but more and more impetus should be given to decarbonization of transport and other hard-to-abate sectors like steel, fertilizers, through prioritizing new technologies like green hydrogen. Now, as a late starter in solar module manufacturing and electric vehicles, India missed the golden opportunity to drive the cost advantages of the economies of scale. However, I would say with deployment of green hydrogen, India is ensuring the building blocks are in place for a hydrogen economy that will not only meet only the domestic needs, but also provide export opportunities. So for adoption at a large scale, it is critical that renewable energy, and electrolyzer costs for the green hydrogen, especially, is what I'm talking about, which are one of the main components driving the cost of green hydrogen, needs to go down in the next few years. Bloomberg NEF predicts that the levelized cost of energy of solar PV will fall from $60 per megawatt hour currently to $30 per megawatt hour by 2030 and $20 per megawatt hour by 2050. The cost of green hydrogen is predicted to fall to 0.9 cents to $3 per kg by 2030 and $0.7 cents to $1.8 per kg by 2050. So domestically produced cheaper electrolyzers combined with ultra low cost renewables backed by clear policy support will help India realize its green hydrogen potential. The government needs to accelerate deployment of renewable energy. However, the imposition of various tariffs and non-tariff barriers like the BCD on solar equipment and the approved list of modules and manufacturers are creating some headwinds for the renewable energy sector and are driving the prices upwards in the short term. But these are only short-term increase that we'll witness, but in the longer term, we are expecting the prices to go down. So the government has followed a right approach by providing a fillip to domestic manufacturing through schemes like production linked incentives. And that's how India needs to go forward in terms of achieving its sustainability goals.
Yes, ma'am. Now, I would like to conclude by asking that what is the role of finance in meeting India's energy transition goal?
Finance will play a big role in helping countries achieve their net zero targets. As per one of the recent McKinsey's report, global capital spending on physical assets for energy and land use system in the net zero transition between 2021 and 2050 would amount to about $275 trillion or equivalent to $9.2 trillion per year on average, which is an annual increase of as much as $3.5 trillion from today. So it means an extra $1 trillion in addition to today's annual spend would need to be reallocated from high emissions to low emission assets. This is like huge in terms of, helping any country to achieve its decarbonization goals or to achieve its energy transition pathway. For India, as per this report, it means capital requirement would be about 11% of GDP compared to the global average of about 7.5% of GDP. So it needs to invest about 1.5 times more than the advanced economies as a share of GDP today to support economic development and build low carbon infrastructure. While we don't have a detailed studies on India's net zero emissions, the IEA Energy Outlook 2021 presented various scenarios, which included the sustainable development scenario, wherein India will witness an early peak and rapid subsequent decline in emissions consistent with a longer-term drive to net zero. The scenario illustrates the net zero roadmap for India, but IEA has shifted the global goalpost from 2070 to 2050. So if we look at the short-term target of 2030, the expected annual investment for deployment of renewable energy, battery storage, electric vehicles, and network expansion and modernization of the grid is about $110 billion in the sustainable development scenario for India. This means India would need investments of $1.1 trillion between 2021 and 2030. And this is massive. This is about 3 times the current annual investment of $40 billion in these sectors. But as I said, there's no dearth of investment available. We just need to ensure that the investment flows to the renewable energy sector in India. And 2021 actually saw some very big ticket renewable investments by large companies like Reliance committing to US $80 billion over the next 10 to 15 years. Adani further committed $50 billion by 2030. So there were so many companies who had committed large chunk of pool, and India really needs to ensure that it has the right set of framework and right set of policies to attract this global capital pool.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing your kind thoughts. It was a pleasure speaking to you on this very important topic. I hope India achieves its COP26 targets of net zero emission by 2070. Once again, thank you so much.